good evening, noon, afternoon, morning, or night, depending on where you are, when you're watching, and what's going on in your life. Right now, we're taking a look at Tucker on Twitter. Tucker Carlson's newest venture into giving you the news that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. The stuff you should be afraid of. And I'm hoping that in typical Tucker Carlson fashion, this will be perfectly reasonable and well-adjusted. Full disclosure, I've never seen Tucker Carlson's show on Fox. I'm just making a judgment because he's so popular. I'm sure it must be reasonable and well-adjusted. And I'm going to be cutting it up a little bit just to avoid any copyright strikes. So here we go. Let's see what he's got to say.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. This morning it looks like somebody blew up the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine.
Going right for it, pulling no punches. This man knows one speed, and that's fast. Gotta go. Sonic the Hedgehog over here. So let's get into it.
The rushing wall of water wiped out entire villages, destroyed a critical hydropower plant, and as of tonight puts the largest nuclear reactor in Europe in danger of melting down. So if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic, it was an act of terrorism. The question is, who did it? Well, let's see. The Kakhovka Dam was effectively Russian. It was built by the Russian government. It currently sits in Russian-controlled territory. The dam's reservoir supplies water to Crimea, which has been, for the last 240 years, home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Blowing up the dam may be bad for Ukraine, but it hurts Russia more. And for precisely that reason, the Ukrainian government has considered destroying it. In December, the Washington Post quoted a Ukrainian general saying his men had fired American-made rockets at the dam's floodgate as a test strike. So really, once the facts start coming in, it becomes much less of a mystery what might have happened to the dam. Any fair person would conclude that the Ukrainians probably blew it up.
Tucker here. Any reasonable person would come to the conclusion that the Ukraine blew up their own dam and then are sabotaging their own nuclear reactor?
Putin did it!
Because obviously that's going to hurt Russia? I don't know here.
Ukraine, as you may have heard, is led by a man called Zelensky. And we can say for a dead certain fact that he was not involved. He couldn't have been. Zelensky is too decent for terrorism.
Here we go. This seems pretty reasonable. I don't see what could go wrong with this.
Now, you see him on television, and it's true you might form a different impression. Sweaty and rat-like, a comedian turned oligarch, a persecutor of Christians, a friend of BlackRock. Of all the people in the world, our shifty, dead-eyed Ukrainian friend in the tracksuit is uniquely incapable of blowing up a dam.
Oh, God. What? I mean, God, what did he do to get roasted like that?
That's why Lindsey Graham is so attracted to him. They're just two good people, hanging out together and being good. And like all good people, when they meet in person, they spend a lot of time talking about killing people and laughing like friends do. Here's the pair last week.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
No, it's
Actually not how the conversation went. You can go watch the interview for yourself. It's only about 1 minute and 40 seconds between Lindsey Graham and Zelensky, which I encourage you to do. Don't take my word for it as a dumbass on the internet, just like you shouldn't take Tucker Carlson's word for it as another dumbass on the internet. You should always verify things for yourself. But he has taken this interview out of context and cut it in a way to represent them saying things that they actually didn't say. They said, this is the best money we ever spent, and Lindsey Graham also did say that we are killing a lot of Russians, but the conversation did not go in that way, and Tucker's definitely mischaracterizing the way in which the conversation happened.
The Russians are dying. It's the best money we've ever spent, Graham says. A smile spreads across his thin, quivering lips as he forms the words. He looks like a starving man contemplating a breakfast buffet. The aroma of death has aroused Lindsey Graham. Thanks so much, replies Zelensky. He feels the same way.
Super strange little creative writing monologue there. You know, it makes me think of how Adolf Hitler was a failed painter And then he ended up becoming an absolute monster. Maybe Tucker Carlson was an aspiring creative writer. Hard to tell.
It is vitally important for you to support Ukraine because it's necessary for Ukraine to be supported by you. Your support is mandatory until it's finished, whatever it is, and whatever that means. So shut up and support Ukraine, or else you're in trouble. Back when they still taught logic, statements like this were known as tautologies. Something is true because it is. The more you repeat it, the truer it becomes. It's a self-reinforcing reality. There was a time when tautologies were considered illegitimate arguments, not to mention hilariously stupid. Only dumb people talk like that.
Someone who went to school and studied logic, I gotta say, I'm not sure if Tucker here was paying attention. A tautology is actually a logical statement which must be true in the virtue of its premise conclusion structure. It will either rain or not rain tomorrow. That statement has to be true because one of the two is going to happen. There's no other logical conclusion. What he is describing is called begging the question or circular reasoning. You know, you can't break the law because breaking the law is illegal. There's no actual argument there. Your premise and your conclusion affirm each other. So I think Tucker might need to go back to school for logic here. I'm not sure.
By this point, it's possible that American citizens are the least informed people in the world.
That could have something to do with people getting their information from the formerly most popular show on network television. Check my notes. The Tucker Carlson Show on Fox News. Huh.
A former Air Force officer who worked for years in military intelligence came forward as a whistleblower to reveal that the U.S. government has physical evidence of crashed non-human-made aircraft, as well as the bodies of the pilots who flew those aircraft. The Pentagon has spent decades studying these otherworldly remains in order to build more technologically advanced weapons systems. Okay, that's what the former intel officer revealed, and it was clear he was telling the truth.
So here's another great example of circular reasoning, which he was just criticizing. It was clear he was telling the truth. Why is it clear that he was telling the truth? Well, because he seemed honest. And then this is another fallacy that he's engaging in, is appeal to authority. So this guy must be telling the truth because of his credentials. And why can we trust him? Because he has the credentials and he seemed honest, right? So he's criticizing fallacious reasoning in one aspect, but then he uses it himself to create a narrative when it behooves him.
In other words, UFOs are actually real, and apparently so is extraterrestrial life. Now we know. In a normal country, this news would qualify as a bombshell, the story of the millennium. But in our country, it doesn't. There was nothing at all about how an alien species is flying hypersonic aircraft over our cities. Not one word.
Claim that is verifiably untrue. Not the fact that there was the whistleblower, but he's attempting to make this claim that this was some sort of huge bombshell news that was suppressed. If you go verify yourself, you will see that most major media outlets, internationally and nationally, acknowledged this story, talked about the whistleblower, talked about the UFOs, and it was hours before he posted this show on Twitter. So that's just a false claim.
So if you're wondering why our country seems so dysfunctional, this is a big part of the reason. Nobody knows what's happening.
Yeah, and especially not him. You know, one of the real problems in this country is that grifters like this can go around and rampantly spread misinformation and hate speech and get filthy rich doing it. Well, that was a wild and wacky first episode from Tucker on Twitter. Exceptionally reasonable and well-adjusted, beyond my wildest expectations. And I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So thanks for joining me. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. And bye.
Why do people say the news is full of lies?